The theater was buzzing with chatter that evening. People filled the seats dressed in their finest clothes, ready to witness a night of dazzling performances. On stage, a shiny grand piano stood under the warm glow of the lights, waiting for the next performer to take their place. When the announcer called the next name, no one expected much. It was Clara, a woman from the village who never boasted about any musical skill. She wore a simple dress, nothing like the glamorous outfits of the other performers, and walked slowly toward the piano with quiet steps. A few people in the audience chuckled, already assuming it would be a disaster. Some whispered that this must be a mistake, that surely she did not belong in such a grand competition. Clara sat down carefully, her fingers hovering above the keys, as if she were greeting an old friend. The room grew restless, with soft laughter and doubtful murmurs filling the air. But then Clara closed her eyes and pressed the first key. The note rang out pure and steady. Her hands began to move gracefully across the piano, faster and faster, weaving together a melody so rich and powerful that it seemed to breathe life into the entire hall. The same audience that had mocked her moments before fell silent, their eyes wide with disbelief. Every note carried emotion, every chord painted pictures in their minds, as though Clara was telling a story without words. The judges leaned forward, unable to take their eyes off her. Even the maestro, who had laughed the loudest at her entrance, now sat frozen, his jaw clenched, as if the music itself had silenced him. Clara continued to play, the music flowing like a river, unstoppable and alive, filling every corner of the room. The laughter was gone, replaced by awe and admiration. Some in the audience even had tears welling in their eyes, moved by the sheer beauty of what they were hearing. It was as though the piano itself had chosen Clara as its voice, and the world finally understood what she had kept hidden within her heart all along. Clara kept her eyes closed as her fingers danced across the keys. She was no longer just playing, she was living the music, breathing it into existence with every movement. The crowd leaned forward, holding their breath, not wanting to miss even a single note. Children who had been restless earlier now sat still, their eyes wide, as though watching magic unfold before them. The melody shifted from soft whispers to thunderous waves, filling the hall with power and grace. Some people in the back row clasped their hands together, unable to stop themselves from trembling at the emotion washing over them. The maestro lowered his gaze, ashamed of his earlier mockery, yet unable to look away. The judges exchanged glances, each one silently admitting that Clara was unlike any performer they had ever heard before. The once doubtful murmurs of the crowd had turned into quiet gasps of admiration. Every pause, every swell, every delicate touch of the keys carried weight, as though Clara was pouring her very soul into the piano. The grand hall seemed transformed, lit not by chandeliers, but by the brilliance of her music. When the notes slowed and softened, the silence that followed was heavy with wonder. Clara opened her eyes for the first time and saw the sea of faces staring at her in disbelief. She took a quiet breath and lifted her hands, once more letting the melody rise again like dawn breaking over a sleeping world. The audience was caught between awe and emotion, their hearts tied to every sound she created. The night that had begun with doubt and laughter was now unfolding into something no one would ever forget. Clara felt the energy of the room pulsing through her as she continued to play. The notes seemed to float above the crowd, weaving invisible threads that bound everyone together in the same rhythm and breath. Some closed their eyes, letting the sound carry them to memories long forgotten, while others leaned forward, clinging to every second, as if afraid it might end too soon. The maestro, who once smirked at her, now sat motionless, his lips slightly parted, his pride crumbling with each note she played. He could see now that Clara was not just a simple woman, she was an artist, whose gift surpassed arrogance and ego. A young boy in the front row leaned against his mother, whispering that he wanted to play just like her. The mother wiped away tears, but nodded, her heart moved in ways she had never expected. Clara pressed on her hands, gliding across the keys faster and faster, building a storm of sound that made the chandeliers above tremble. Gasps filled the hall as the melody swelled into a breathtaking climax, filling every corner with fire and light. When the storm finally eased, the music softened into a gentle lull, as though the piano itself was sighing after telling its deepest secrets. Clara lowered her head, feeling the weight of every emotion she had released into the air. The hall was silent, not with disbelief this time, but with reverence, as though they all knew they had just witnessed something sacred. Even the air felt different, charged, alive, transformed by the power of her music. Clara lifted her head slowly, her eyes glistening under the warm lights of the hall. The silence that followed was heavier than thunder, and yet it carried a beauty that words could not describe. Then, as if awakened from a spell, the audience rose to their feet one after another until the entire room stood clapping, cheering, and calling her name. Clara felt her chest tighten, not with fear, but with a deep gratitude that her music had reached their souls. The maestro remained seated, his hands trembling as he finally joined the applause, though his face carried the weight of shame and admiration mixed together. He had mocked her, doubted her, even laughed at her, and now he was humbled by the truth her playing was beyond measure. Clara stepped back from the piano, her heart racing, as she took in the sight of strangers who moments before had dismissed her, now honoring her as though she were royalty. A little girl pushed through the crowd holding a small violin and whispered to Clara that she wanted to learn from her. Clara bent down with a gentle smile, promising that one day she would. The applause only grew louder, echoing through the hall like waves crashing against a shore refusing to end. Clara stood there, surrounded by sound, by light, by admiration, and for the first time, she felt truly seen, truly free, truly alive. Clara looked across the hall, her breath still unsteady from the weight of the moment. The maestro finally rose from his seat, his eyes never leaving her, as if he were searching for words that refused to come. He walked toward her slowly, and the audience hushed, waiting to see what he would do. When he reached her, he bowed his head, not in mockery, but in genuine respect. Clara felt the world tilt for a moment. Never in her life had she imagined the maestro himself would show her such humility. He took her hand, raising it gently for the audience to see, and the applause thundered once more, shaking the very walls. Clara's heart swelled as tears blurred her vision, but she stood tall, her soul steady as the piano that had carried her. From the crowd, voices began to call out, asking her name, asking her to play again, begging her not to leave. She glanced at the piano, then at the eager faces, shining with awe and hope. Her fingers tingled as if the keys themselves were calling her back, whispering promises of stories yet to be told through music. Clara inhaled deeply, the energy of the room filling her chest, and she stepped forward, ready to play once more. Clara sat at the piano again, her fingertips brushing lightly across the keys, as if she were greeting an old friend. The crowd leaned forward, no one daring to breathe as silence wrapped around the hall. Then she began to play a soft melody that rose like dawn over a quiet valley, gentle, but filled with a quiet strength. The notes shimmered, weaving together a story of struggle and hope, of laughter and tears, of life itself. Every sound seemed to sink into the hearts of those listening, pulling them into her world, where words were no longer needed. The maestro stood to the side, his arms crossed, but his eyes glistened with something he had not shown before: humility. Clara played on her body, swaying with the rhythm, her soul pouring into every chord. The audience followed each rise and fall, some wiping tears, others closing their eyes to feel the music more deeply. Children in the front row clutched the edge of their seats, their faces glowing with wonder, as if they were witnessing magic. And still Clara played, never faltering, never looking away from the keys that now carried not only her story, but theirs too. The melody shifted, growing bolder, stronger, like a river breaking free from stone. Clara let the power of the music guide her hands, her expression calm, yet filled with fire. Gasps echoed across the hall as the tempo quickened, each note striking with precision and passion. The maestro lowered his arms slowly, his mouth parting, as he realized the woman he had mocked was teaching him what music truly meant. Clara closed her eyes, lost in the sound, her fingers dancing with such grace that it seemed the piano itself was alive. The audience leaned even closer, caught between awe and disbelief, unable to look away from the miracle unfolding before them. Every chord filled the air with a force that reached deep inside, leaving no soul untouched. Tears began to stream down faces, row after row, as people felt memories awaken within them, memories they had long forgotten. And through it all, Clara remained steady, her humble presence magnified by the strength of her music, turning the hall into a sacred place. The once playful joke had turned into a moment of reverence, and no one dared to laugh now. The final notes of her powerful passage lingered in the air before fading into a tender whisper. Clara eased the melody back down, her touch soft and delicate, as though she was cradling a fragile memory. The hall grew so quiet that the sound of each keystroke seemed to echo into eternity. The maestro bowed his head slightly, unable to hide the respect now glowing in his eyes. Clara breathed deeply, her chest rising and falling with the rhythm as if she and the piano were one. The audience sat frozen, their emotions tangled between wonder and disbelief. Some clasped their hands tightly, others let their tears fall freely, overwhelmed by the beauty that filled the room. Clara's posture remained gentle, her modest nature unshaken, as though she had not just changed the lives of everyone watching. Her hands slowed, her song settling into a gentle lullaby that wrapped the hall in warmth. And with every final note, she gave the room a gift, one that would remain in their hearts long after the sound had faded. As the last gentle note dissolved into silence, the audience remained still, holding on to the echo as if afraid to break the spell. Clara lifted her hands from the keys and folded them quietly in her lap, her eyes lowered with humility. The maestro rose from his chair, his expression transformed from skepticism to awe. Slowly, he began to clap his hands, the sound sharp and commanding in the vast hall. The audience followed, at first hesitantly, then with rising energy, until the entire room thundered with applause. Clara blinked in surprise, her cheeks flushed with color as she realized the depth of their reaction. Some people stood unable to remain seated as they clapped, others called out words of praise, carried away by emotion. Clara looked up at last, her modest smile shy but radiant as it met the eyes of the crowd. The maestro stepped closer, his voice steady yet filled with reverence as he spoke. "Clara, you have given us a gift tonight." Her heart trembled at his words, but her spirit remained humble, for she knew the music was never meant to prove anything, it was only meant to be shared. Clara rose slowly from the piano bench, her hands trembling slightly from the weight of what had just happened. The applause still roared around her like a storm, but inside, she felt a calm she had never known before. She bowed her head once in gratitude, her simple presence commanding more respect than any proud display ever could. The maestro approached her, offering his hand, and for a moment the hall grew quiet, watching the gesture of honor. Clara accepted with a quiet nod, her smile warm and sincere. As they stood together, the audience erupted once more, their voices and hands joining in a chorus of admiration. Clara knew then that she had not only played music, she had touched hearts. When the lights dimmed and the crowd slowly dispersed, her name lingered in whispers carried with wonder and respect. The simple woman who had walked in, overlooked and underestimated, had walked out remembered forever.